magician!
Hey YouTube, Magician84 here, and I'm on a top 10 streak at the moment. So this is a redo of a top 10 video that I did some point in 2015. But obviously that video's long gone, and things would have changed since that list. So here's a redo of it. This is basically the top 10 cards that I used to hate, but not anymore. Although some, well, I guess a couple of them would be considered love-hate cards, especially the first two. So let's kick things off. So in at number 10 is, Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, a synchro that I used to hate a lot, but not so much anymore. Like cards that negate monster effects, monsters that negate monster effects continuously can be really annoying, but I find that they're easier to deal with than dark bribes on legs and monsters that negate everything. I still hate it when this card is used against me, especially since George always goes for it whenever I play against his Speedroids and use it alongside Crystal Clear Wing Synchro Dragon, which makes it very hard to win against him. But it's not as bad as when it's summoned off the Wind Witch engine, in which case there's fuck all ways to get rid of it. But I have found other ways around it over the years. Just get rid of it with spells and traps that remove a monster from the field in some way or another. Or of course there's Utopia the Lightning, or Heroic Champion Excalibur. Or of course there is this one way I did to get rid of it, which was just make Archfiend Black Skull Dragon and attack over it. That worked. Also, there were a couple of occasions where I brought out King Calamity against it and chain blocked it, so that I would, by using it with Synchron Resonator. So I'd go King Calamity effect, then chain Synchron Resonator to add a tuner from grave to hand, which meant that Crystal Wing can't negate Calamity's effect. It was great. But yeah, this was really frustrating. Like, I guess throughout the course of 2016, 17, 18 and 19 it just really annoyed me a lot, depending on what decks it was being played in, whether it was Speedroids or anything with Guard Dragons. I hated it. But then of course I grew more used to it, and like I said, found a lot of ways to deal with it more easily. It's still an annoying problem, but not as much of a problem as something like, again, a Dark Bribe or Legs, or a monster that negates everything. So yeah, it was fine. And then of course, when I started playing Speedroids, I decided to play it. I did play 2 at first, but then played just 1, because I didn't want to heavily rely on it. And sometimes I'd use it as a Waking the Dragon option, mainly in my Egyptian God deck. And let me tell you, Waking the Dragon is a godsend, like, no pun intended. Number 9, Infinite Impermanence. Yeah, there was a time where I actually used to hate this card a lot. In fact, there were several times where Weber's 5 would use this against me in his Pendulum Magician deck, and fucking hell, it was so annoying. Like, it was bad enough when my deck was being negated by Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon, or like I was getting OTK'd or having my stuff popped by time pendulum graph. This was just insult to injury. And then it ended up being one of the most popular traps in the game, and one of the most used ones, just because of its versatility. But then I just grew more used to it, just like Crystal Wing, because I did find ways around it, and found that I could play through it, although there were a couple of times where I'd make the mistake of activating a spell or trap in the same column if it was set. Heck, even times where it would end up costing me the game, or then again it wouldn't have mattered so much, but I have been able to find ways around it and get smarter with it, and then I decided I wanted to get hold of it myself. Problem was, it was too expensive and too difficult to get, and I'm glad it got reprinted in Dual Power, which made it a lot easier to get. And sometimes I'd use it on and off, but only ever in Dark Magician, even though I was kind of hesitant about it, considering activating it from hand wouldn't be easy, considering I rely on back row a lot. But of course I could still set it like any other trap, of course. And like I said, I'd use it on and off occasions. And it's still a great form of monster effect negation, although I do still prefer Solemn Strike, because Solemn Strike doesn't target, and it actually destroys the monster, whereas this targets and doesn't destroy. And of course Solemn Strike isn't as easy to counter as Imperm. Of course, it's down to personal preference, but now I like it, and like I said, I just play it whenever I can. Number 8, Blowback Dragon. Very random, I know, but yeah. Before late 2006, I fucking hated this card a lot, as it could just pop any card too easily, just like that. Sure, it's a gamble and requires 2 heads on a coin, but it just felt like luck wasn't on my side whenever it would come out. In fact, a friend of mine would use this a lot against me, and it would get rid of my battle traps and my defensive monsters like Gravekeeper's Spy, Apprentice Magician, and any flip effect monster. Like, my god, it was annoying. But again, I think I was able to deal with it through various other ways. Yeah, depending on what deck I was playing. At least if I could bring out Dark Magician or Blade Edge or one of my Elemental Hero fusions, I could attack over it. But yeah, it just annoyed me a lot back in the day. But then I grew more used to it, and then I decided to play this in my generic machine deck when I first put that deck together, and it became one of the main deck boss monsters, and it proved to be a great asset in the deck. Oh yeah, and that is an original print from Ancient Sanctuary, by the way. I've had this for a long time. Number 7, Kaiu the Ghost Destroyer. Something that I used to despise a lot. Then I stopped hating it, then started playing it myself, and then became helpful in my Dark Magician deck, and then, but then I guess it became more of a love-hate card again. But yeah, it was so annoying in the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh! Just getting rid of monsters from my graveyard just like that. Well, especially any boss monsters that I would have liked to get back from the grave with Monster Reborn or Premature Burial. In fact, Chaos decks of any kind were a deck that I used to hate, and yeah, there were not enough words to describe how much I hated it. Partially because of this card, but also because of Chaos Emperor Dragon, Yatalok, and Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the beginning. Yeah, a couple of those cards are spoilers for what's coming up on this list, but yeah, it was infuriating. But then, like somewhere in March or April, basically some point during the spring of 2005, I decided to try and have a more open mind about Kaiu, and I figured this would be a great way to counter Chaos decks as well, due to its other effect that would generally be overlooked, where the opponent can't banish anything from the graveyard, which meant that if the opponent had a BLS or something, they couldn't summon it. So I got hold of this to specifically counter BLS and stop it coming out, and regardless of what deck I was playing, whether it was Dark Paladin, Warriors, or pure Dark Magician, it just helped me out a lot, and did throughout the following 3 years. It was just great. But like I said, it also became a love-hate card. I mean, a card that I don't mind using myself, but is still infuriating when used against me. You know, although there was one point where I faced an Elemental Hero player in a tournament back in 2006, and he couldn't activate Miracle Fusion, and I did genuinely feel bad about that. Of course, there would be times where I'd feel like I don't want to use Kaiu's effect to banish monsters, because I don't want to resort to doing that. Like I said, it's never something I want to resort to doing, like, unless it's a situation where I really have to. Either that, or there's hated monsters involved, in which case I will gladly banish those fuckers. Number 6, Tribe Infecting Virus. Another monster that I used to absolutely hate back in the day, whether it was played in Chaos or generic water decks. Yeah, it pissed me off so much, just because it could get rid of certain monsters way too easily, and isn't even once per turn. The other thing about it that annoyed me was that there were fuck all ways to stop this card. In fact, the only counters I could think of from back then were Book of Moon to save a certain monster, Skill Drain, and Divine Wrath. Like, either that or you could just negate the summon with Solemn Judgment, but then again, I didn't have Solemn Judgment back then. Yeah, it was one of those cards that was making my life a misery, although not as much as Chaos Emperor Dragon and Yatagarasu, or Ring of Destruction. But again, like I said, my feelings about it became the same as with Kaiu, like in the spring of 2005, I decided to try and be more open-minded about it. And then I decided to pick up a copy of it for myself, again as a way to counter BLS, because before I had fuck all ways to deal with BLS back then. Well, I did have Mirror Force and Lava Golem, but it wasn't enough. I don't think I actually played Lava Golem in a deck. I did have it because it came with a random bundle that I bought off eBay back in 2004. Yeah, I was assuming I'd get better cards, like, or more cooler cards like Blackluster Dragon, but no such luck there. What was I going to say? Yeah, I did get Mirror Force in the summer of 2004, but for some reason it just never showed up when BLS would hit the field. But anyway, even though Yatta and Chaos Emperor Dragon weren't around in 2005, I still needed a way to specifically deal with BLS, and I felt Tribe would help me out a lot, along with Smashing Ground. And yeah, it did, and it proved to be a very helpful asset. Up until the October 2005 list, when it got banned. Yeah, it did save my arse in certain situations. Number 5, Ancient Gear Beast. Yeah, another random one, I know, but yeah, this was another card that I used to really, really fucking hate a lot. In fact, I hated this card throughout almost all of 2006, as again, this was another card that a friend of mine ran in his deck. Oh, first it was a deck based on Perfect Machine King, then it became Bazoo Return, and this was one of the cards that he played along with Blowback Dragon, and it just pissed me off so much, because it rendered Mirror Force, Magic Cylinder and Sakuratsu Armor useless, as well as things like Old Vindictive, Apprentice and Magician of Faith. Oh yeah, and Gravekeeper's Guard. Gravekeeper's Spy not so much, because at least it would survive the battle. So that was something at least. Oh yeah, and it did counter Cyberjar as well, back when I was using it, until that got banned. Yeah, it was just so annoying, and again, I had fuck all ways to deal. Well, I had ways to deal with it on my turn, but there was fuck all I could do about it on my opponent's turn, and I even used to want this card banned. That didn't happen, of course, but again, like I said, I did have ways to deal with it on my turn. I just had to overcome that saltiness, and I did. And then I had no reason to hate it, and then again, this also became a high-level boss monster that I'd play in my generic machine deck. In fact, in December 2006, when my machine deck was made, I even summoned this against him, and he just seemed to be really insulted. That was funny. And this is one of the few Ancient Gear monsters that I actually hate. 2 seconds. Sorry about that. So, as I was saying, Ancient Gear Beast became one of the few Ancient Gear cards that I hate nowadays. As I've said before, I hate Ancient Gears because all they ever do is OTK, but there's still like a few that I don't hate. This card, Ancient Gear Golem, Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem, Ancient Gear Engineer, Ancient Gear Soldier, so basically almost all the very old ones. Whereas the newer stuff is used to get OTKs off in some way or another, even though they require Ancient Gear Golem as well, but still that's not the point. Yeah, that's the story of Beast. Number 4, another classic, Guardian Sphinx. Yeah, very random, I know, but yeah, this used to make my life a misery as well, like back in the day. Again, we're talking 2004 here, because a guy I knew was playing an Earth deck and would have this card, and he'd just keep using it to bounce all my monsters back to hand, leaving me with no defences, and fucking hell, it was so annoying. And again, because I was an amateur back then, I had no way to deal with it or get rid of it. I don't think I even had Dark Hole, or did I? I can't remember, but I must have done, because Chris, as in my brother Chris, had 3 out of 4 of the classic starter decks, Yugi, Joey and Kaiba, and all of them do have a Dark Hole, so I must have had one as well, I swear. Well, if I did, it was my only way to get rid of it, but I was just hardly ever drawing it, so I had to get hold of better cards just so I could deal with this card. Yeah, it was just hard to do. It was really annoying. So I decided to do the same thing and play this in a deck, and see how he liked it. The problem was, he found a way around it by attacking with a beat stick that didn't go over 2400, but it would force Guardian Sphinx to flip up in the damage step, and it would mean that well, I'd have to keep manually setting it, and if I did decide to flip summon it and use its effect, it would then be stuck in attack position and would make it vulnerable. I did of course point out a flaw in this plan, was that it would keep costing him life points, but it didn't seem to matter. I don't even remember who won or what kind of deck I was playing this in. It wasn't a real life deck though, it was a deck I made on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Virtual Desktop. Hey, leave a like and a comment if any OG Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans remember the Yu-Gi-Oh! Virtual Desktop. I think eventually I did get hold of other ways of dealing with it, but then that deck just stopped seeing play, and I decided to try and get one myself. In fact, I got this one as a Christmas present back in 2005, just because I wanted to have it. I'm trying to remember if I ever did play it in a deck, but I can't remember exactly. But still, it's a cool classic card, just to have. I know, of course, there's an upgraded version which came out in a recent set, but I haven't seen anyone use it. But still, as annoying as Guardian Sphinx was, again, it wasn't as annoying as the likes of the Chaos monsters and other monsters I already talked about. In fact, it's not even as bad as the bullshit boss monsters we have today. Speaking of boss monsters, this brings us to number 3, Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning. Who would have thought that this would be a card that I used to hate? I hated this card so much in 2004 and the first half of 2005, but I'll get to that shortly. Chaos, well, if I had to pick a hated deck from like the very early days, it would definitely be Chaos or Yatterlock, purely because the Envoys and Yatter existed. They just made my life an absolute misery. They really did, as I've said before. Now, BLS wasn't anywhere near as annoying as Chaos Emperor Dragon, but it was still annoying nonetheless, just banishing my monsters just like that, regardless of whether it was face up or face down. And again, I had fuck all ways to counter it. Until I got hold of Smashing Ground for my deck, every time this card hit the field, I would just auto-lose, because again, I had no way to get rid of it, except with Mirror Force, but that never came up. Actually, neither did Dark Hole, actually. Of course, it didn't help that Dark Hole and Mirror Force got banned on the October 2004 list, but it was just annoying. In fact, it annoyed me so much that I was even making decks designed to specifically counter this deck, including Needleworm. I mean, the plan was to use Needleworm to basically try and make the opponent mill the Envoys from the deck so that they couldn't be used. Sometimes it worked, but other times not so much. And this again would be on the desktop, because back then Needleworm was an expensive tournament pack super rare, and I didn't have the money for that back then. Of course, later on I did get more ways to counter it though. Tribe Infecting Virus, Smashing Ground. In fact, I remember the first time I used Smashing Ground to get rid of BLS. I was just so happy that I finally got rid of it. And then it came back with Call of the Haunted and I lost the game. Typical. But again, as time went on, I got hold of better cards, which led to more ways of dealing with BLS. This would also include DD Warrior Lady, Exiled Force. So yeah, they were a big help, and then I found myself not hating it anymore. And then my good friend Brendan, Old Man Sebi, actually gave this to me for my birthday. He was able to pick up one, and I got hold of it, and it would be played in my warrior deck and my Dark Magician deck. So it went back and forth between the two decks. And again, it was a big help for my deck, and I was able to do better in a lot of games with it. But of course, it would still be a love-hate card more than anything. So it was great when I used it myself, but it was still really annoying when it was used against me. And I was, despite the fact that I'd gotten used to BLS and was playing it myself, I was just happy that it got banned on the October 2005 ban list, along with some other annoying cards. And when it got unbanned on the September 2011 list, I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first, but then it didn't see that much play, except in Chaos Dragons. But in later years I ended up playing it in a few decks, mainly Dark Magician, and then later on my Blackluster Soldier deck. And now this card is at 3, and it hardly ever sees play anymore. It's practically non-existent. Boy, how times change. Time has not been kind to this card. Number 2, Ring of Destruction, which once upon a time was tied for my most hated card in the entire game, along with the number 1 pick. Yeah, before this card was errated, it made my life a misery again. I hated it so much, and it's one of the only few things I hate about GOAT format. Just, destroying face-up monsters too easily, just like that, and doing annoying burn damage. And of course, like I said, I really fucking hate it when during my draw phase they'd use Ring of Destruction on their own monster just to take that last cheap shot at my life points, which, like I said before, is cheap, dirty, dishonourable and disrespectful. Well, maybe not so much disrespectful, but it's still cheap, god damn it. It's cheap and dirty, and it's hard to have respect for anyone who'd resort to this. Yeah, and of course, back in the day, it was a card I desperately wanted to see get banned, but it wasn't happening. In fact, I even ran Barrel Behind the Door just to specifically counter this. Not so much the destruction, but I would run Barrel Behind the Door to specifically counter this card and make it so the opponent takes the damage that I would have taken, and basically punish them for using such a cheap, dirty tactic to win. Yeah, situational, I know, but I wanted to do it anyway. I know Book of Moon would be easier, but even though Book was at 3 in GOAT format, it wasn't when Ring of Destruction came back in September 2006. Like, that really irritated me. Like, I was so happy when it got banned on the October 5 list, but I don't know what Upper Deck Entertainment was thinking unbanning it 11 months later. And as far as I remember, it was done to specifically counter Stein OTK, even though it didn't counter shit. All it did was cause more problems and solve absolutely nothing. And it annoyed me when it didn't get rebanned on the March 2007 list. So basically, we had a year of Ring of Destruction for game. Thank God it got banned on the September 2007 list. One of the things I love about that ban list and that format. Yeah, it absolutely deserved to be banned. In fact, it shouldn't have been unbanned in the first place. In fact, the card should never have even been made in the first place. Afterwards, there were people saying that Ring of Destruction should come back, and I'm like, fuck off, should it? It really shouldn't. And I was actually surprised that it got errated. Like, huge erratas seemed to be a thing like in the early 2010s, and this was one of a few classic cards that got errated, and now this is a fair and balanced card. And I think it's at 3 now, I'm actually not sure. Yeah, it's great that they changed it so that it only affects an opponent's monster. A monster whose attack points are equal or less than the opponent's life points, and it makes it so that the card holder takes the damage first and then the opponent. This was also a great way to stop games ending in a draw. And it's also errata to a hard once per turn as well, which is quite funny actually. But of course this just fell out of favour. It came back after this errata, and now no one plays it. Well, no one except me, because I then decided to play this in my legendary knight deck. Not only to use it for its effect, which didn't come up very much, but also I also wanted to use it just to get out Destruction Dragon. Like, even though the dragons weren't the main focus, it was still a way to use the legendary dragon cards and then build up to the legendary knights. Yeah, it's an errata that was very much needed. Yeah, it's not the same as the pre-errata, but it's something that I welcome. Of course, it's just annoying that whenever I play GOAT format games, I end up having to put up with pre-errata, Ring of Destruction. And again, I'm just forced to main deck ways to specifically counter it. And finally, in at number 1, as you might probably guess, it's Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End. This isn't the errated version, by the way. This is its first ever reprint from the Lost Millennium, which was a gift from Emma Blue Eyes 10. But yeah, until Gladiator Beast Heraklinos came along, this bastard, I shouldn't call it that anymore, this card right here was my most hated monster of all time. Like, seriously, I never hated a card so much in my life until it got banned and errated. Yeah, it was just a cheap, annoying, dirty game ender. Just sending everything to the graveyard and doing burn damage to wipe out my life points. Yeah, literally every time it hit the board, it was game over. Hence the name, Envoy of the End. And again, I had no way to counter it. Yeah, there was pretty much just no way to stop it. I know Skill Drain and Solemn Judgment could, but again, I didn't have those cards back then. Yeah, it just really pissed me off just going down to this card, regardless of what I was playing. Yeah, and again, it was a card I desperately wanted to see banned, along with Yatagarasu. Oh yeah, which brings me to the Yatta lock. Yeah, this is one of the cheapest, dirtiest ways to win ever. Like, provided of course you haven't normal summoned yet, just have Sangan or Witch of the Black Forest on the field, drop the Chaos Emperor, send everything to grave, effect of Sangan or Witch to add Yatta, normal Yatta, attack, do damage, the opponent can never draw again during that duel. Yeah, serious. It was seriously so fucking cheap! Ugh. And I still hate Yatta to this day because of that. In fact, that card should never have been unbanned, and I still think it should have stayed fucking banned. Because there's still ways to get the Yatta lock off. Alright, not quite in the same way as back in the day, but it still could be done, and I've seen it done in a deck. But obviously now that the Chaos Emperor is errated, Yatta lock can never happen again, unless of course you play in like any format, any 2004 format pretty much. See, in fact, this card and Yatta are both the reason why I won't play Yatta lock format games. Because people would just end up playing this and just make it so I can't play the game. So then, of course, it got banned on the October 04 list, and I was jumping for joy over this. But unfortunately, there were still annoying cards in the game that were still around. BLS, Snatch Steal, Confiscation, Forceful Sentry, Ring of Destruction, in case I didn't say it already. I'm pretty sure Delinquent Duo got banned on that list, and then got unbanned on the April 2005 list, which was fucking stupid if you ask me. That card is also one of the few things I hate about GOAT. And over the years there were a few people wanting this card back, and I was like, no, 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 this card can never come back ever. And then I think again in 2014 I noticed that the Chaos Emperor was errata. It's just like Ring of Destruction and a few others. And then it was just errata to fuck, and changed so that if you activate this effect, you literally can't activate anything else in the same turn, and also reduced the burn damage and made it so that it's 300 for each card the opponent sends. Now again, this was an errata that I find acceptable and really balances the card out. Now no one plays the card anymore and calls it shit, even though again there's no such thing as a shit card. I mean, sometimes it would be played in a chaos deck of some kind. In fact, you could probably play it in a modern Chaos Dragon deck. It fits the theme. Actually, did I even put it in my current format Chaos Dragon deck that I made on Edo Pro? I'm pretty sure I did. Let's see, Chaos Dragon, Chaos Dragon. Oh wait, I probably made it on my laptop. But yeah, anyway, the point is with Chaos Emperor Dragon errata to fuck, I now don't see a reason to hate it anymore. In fact, I actually play this in my Casino Knight deck, because I thought it could do with some extra oomph. I mean, there's a good balance of light and dark monsters in there. So I thought I might as well. Right, here it is. Where's the end result? Oh yeah, I did put it in there. Excellent. I must have been mad if I didn't. Anyway, yeah, that pretty much wraps up this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like and a comment, share and subscribe if you haven't subbed already. And let me know in the comments down below if there's any cards that you used to hate but don't anymore. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the Dark Magician YouTube channel.